There are many things I'd like to say to you, but I can't until next week. But this is VGC, a video game podcast with me, Jordan Midler, and Chris Scullion. Chris, it's just us this week again. The audience demanded it. The two-handed is back.
I don't know what it is. I think people are just intimidated by us now, and they just don't want to come on the show. We're just such a force in entertainment.
I phoned up Ethan Lawrence last night, and he said, after your abuse 2 episodes in a row, you can go F yourself, boys. He was away filming Scorsese's new picture, actually. So good for him. A
remake of Dr. Dolittle, I believe.
Yeah. He plays all the animals. It's really impressive. This week we've got some headlines. Obviously, it's been a bit of a busy week, although I've not really noticed much of it because, as you may know from Twitter, I can legally say that I'm playing Starfield, and that's about it. We can talk about it more on the 31st, which is a week today, which means we can talk about it on next week's podcast, I believe.
Convenient.
I didn't actually check what time the review is, but being sensible, we will hold the podcast until we can talk about Starfield, so look forward to that next week. So my week's been pretty full up. How's your week been, Chris?
It's been okay. Obviously, Gamescom is a busy week. It's not been as busy as it has been in like previous years. I think because the opening night live thing was okay. It was more like Jeff Gilly said, to be fair, it was more a bunch of updates on games we already know about rather than a lot of brand new game announcements. So it was a manageable show this year. Obviously, Andy's in Germany just now, actually playing a lot of the stuff and doing interviews and stuff, so he's putting the work in over there, whereas we're usually we have a busier time of it, like kind of covering all the news, but there hasn't been as much news this time, so it's been okay. It's been manageable, which is nice.
Yeah, let's just get into it. Story number 1, Gamescom Opening Night Live Roundup. I've just picked out some things here that I thought were interesting. First of all, Little Nightmares 3 was announced, which was an interesting announcement, especially when the trailer started and it said Supermassive Games. I first thought, is this like the Quarry sequel, or is this another one of those the Dark Pictures anthology or whatever the name of those games are? But it's a sequel to Little Nightmares 2, a game that was developed by Tarsier, who, following Little Nightmares 2, said, we're not doing any more of these, but Bandai Namco said, yes, we're going to do more of them. How did this announcement hit your ear, Chris?
It was fine. I mean, I've not played the first 2 for my sins. There's 2 that are on the ever-growing backlog, which will never be completed by the time I'm dead. But it's the appeal to me, and this third one, the trailer appealed to me as well. Like you say, Supermassive is an interesting one because it doesn't immediately strike you as a sort of studio that would make a game like that. But that's maybe me just typecasting, considering that they've done like Until Dawn and, like you say, the Dark Pictures games and the Quarry. It's like it feels very like so it'll be interesting to see if the mechanics are kind of nailed and it feels like the previous 2 games. But I mean, they're far from a bad studio, so I've got faith that they'll do something good with it.
So I played the first one, quite liked it. There was an element of this is very limbo-esque, they were very much going for that, and I feel like they kind of shook that for the second one, but I never ended up playing that. So yeah, as you say, Supermassive, you think of these very specific kind of choice-based adventure games. Like, I enjoyed The Quarry. I played through that. I thought that was pretty decent. It's one of these ones where I play through maybe every third one of those games because it reminds me of the Telltale, when Telltale was like running the show.
Them out,
yeah, I could play 1 in 5 of those because it's just the same thing over and over again. But people that swear by those type of games seem to really enjoy them. They also look ridiculous. I don't know if you looked at the Quarry, but the facial animation in the Quarry is insane.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The games like that for me those are my exercise games. This is a peek into my life. Is that we've got like an exercise bike, and I'm bored at my mind every time I use it. And you can't really play many games. I think if I can play games well exercising, that's the dream.
Yeah.
And I can't play a lot of games like that because you're moving about. You can't like concentrate with your hand on a controller. But the Quarry and games of its ilk work because you just press the button every now and then, so you can use an exercise bike while playing it, and that to me is a seal of approval.
Funnily enough, that actually, it reminds me of, I've been playing, well, before Starfield came in, I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 with my girlfriend watching, and because it's so dialogue heavy and so much about like choices and stuff like that, I felt myself not wanting to be holding the controller. Like I almost wanted like eye tracking basically to like pick the options for me. Like I didn't feel like super controller invested, and it's like it's not so bad these days, but I feel like Sony games used to be bad for big long cutscene, and then you'd basically put the controller down, and then a big square would pop up, and you'd be like, "Oh shit, Nathan Drake's dead." So yeah, you not just sit opening bronze packs while you're on the exercise bike. Do the bronze pack method.
I'm not patient enough to do that method. I'll be playing my EA Sports FC the honest way.
Yeah, as honest as we play any game. So yeah, that was an interesting announcement. They also announced a podcast, which we shan't talk about here because we don't give free clout to rival podcasts.
Good luck.
I consider that a rival. not the podcasts, the hosts of which we have on this show, like Jeff Gerstmann and Jeff Grubb. A random podcast made by a developer, that's the true rival. Game of the show for both of us, I think, was Thank Goodness You're Here, which is a comedy slapformer, which is being... is it developed by Panic? Or it's
Panic's
Cold
publishing
Supper.
it,
Yeah, Panic's publishing it. 2-man team, which is a, quote, delightfully surreal homage to their own northern hometown. Nothing we can say can do justice to this trailer. This was such a breath of fresh air, Chris.
Yeah, if anyone hasn't seen it, go and look for the Thank Goodness You're Here trailer. It's just insane. It uses that old Lily the Pink song, which I haven't heard in years, and I'm glad that someone's dug that old song up. It in its own is a bit mental, but the game looks hilarious. They said they were inspired by the Beano for their art style, the kind of Beano comic, and you can tell that. For one bit, there's a point where there's loads of really quick cuts of stuff going on, and for a split second, there's a big giant builder's arse, and the wee guy slaps it and it jiggles. And at that point, I was like, I'm sold on this. Like day one, he slaps a big builder's arse. 100%. It looks fantastic. Like the art's it's right up. And then it's got a perfect bit of Scottish dialogue at the end as well, which sounds authentic for once. Big Scottish guy says, "What are you doing here, you wee melon head?" I was like, okay, brilliant. They're
Northern English, so they're all right.
Close enough.
It's not like these down southers trying to do some Scottish.
Yeah, it's close enough. I'll take it.
Yeah, I thought this was cool. I love games like this in the show where we lamented it while we were covering the show. That so many of these games just look exactly like each other. Yeah. It's all like 5K graphics with every single mechanic and the idea you've seen in every other game, and then something like this comes out and it's like
even the big one that I can't remember its name just now because my mind is just melted just now, but that big one that was shown that everyone's going on about, the kind of open world game, it looks really cool, but it looks like a million different open world games all joined together, because there's bits of like that, well that's Zelda and that's and that's this and that's that, and it looks excellent, but yeah, again it feels just like different things being stuck together that we've already seen before, which I'll enjoy when it comes out, especially once I remember its name, but I don't know, like this is the only one that made me go, oh, this is very different.
Yeah, got to have something like that in the show. I feel like the show, these shows generally have a bit of a problem with where things are spaced out. Like remember a couple of years ago when it was just like space horror. I feel like that's kind of an issue still, but looking forward to this. Panic.
Do you know what helps you space a show out though? Is 45 minutes of Call of Duty footage.
Yeah, I agree.
Just thrown in for a laugh.
I wish they'd completed the whole campaign on stage there. That would have really...
And I just played multiplayer for 20 hours.
Yeah. My favourite part was when they turned the HDR down as far as possible and turned the brightness on the big telly down as far as possible.
We were saying, could they maybe make this a wee bit darker? Just sitting watching a black screen for ages.
You know, when you start a game and it's like, make sure the logo is barely visible in the middle, they're like, no thank you, all the way to the left.
That's the thing, is that when it says make sure the logo is barely visible, they actually do it. Whereas every other person who does it goes, no, I'm turning that logo up a wee bit so I can actually see what's going on here, mate.
We're specky enough. We don't need to be like squinting to be able to see like where your AK-47 is.
Sad days.
It was a strange... a strange display.
It's a strange one, but also a nicely nostalgic one, because it reminded me of the good old days of E3s from about 10 years ago, when every big game like did like, here's 15 minutes or something, and then it would ironically would halfway through it would say, in the interest of time, and like skip 2 minutes worth, and then do another 10 minutes. It's like, well, if it was in the interest of time, you wouldn't be showing it in the first place, mate. But,
I also think it's interesting to perhaps look back on comments made by the producer of this show about Activision's involvement in future shows and how nothing has seemingly changed, but there they are, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 with fucking vuvuzelas and scarves waving it about, like, strange. Next up, we had a new Alan Wake 2 trailer, which I thought looked excellent. They finally showed the Alan Wake in this Alan Wake 2. Seems like they're really doubling down on the kind of multimedia. There's going to be like live action cutscenes that then cut into actual gameplay. And considering how good the game looks, I think they can probably get away with it.
Yeah,
like, there was a few bits where it was like, is that a guy or is that computer?
Yeah. They like doing that, don't they? That's been good, especially like Quantum Break. Like they did it quite a lot with that. And I'm up for it. It's been a long time since I played the first Alan Wake. I got the remastered one, but I haven't played it yet. So that's one that I'll need to kind of brush up on again before Alan Wake 2 comes out, because I'm definitely going to buy that. It's looking the part, and it sounds like they've got lots of kind of weird. I think the other character, Saga, she's called, like she can go into like a kind of a special mind room where she can like mess around with clues and stuff, and it seems like in her own head and stuff, which it sounds like it's going to be quite odd, but in the best possible way.
In Scotland, a mind room is where you go to remember things, so that is appropriate. I think it's strange considering like the first Alan Wake had like obviously very David Lynch inspired, but it was a bit knockabout. Like you're running about with Christmas lights on and shit like that in one of those missions. Like it was a wee bit spooky, but it wasn't like a horror game. This one seems to be like modern Resident Evil, like in terms of like proper ramping it up, and I think that's a good change.
I hope so. I hope there's still the odd kind of quirky moments in it without ruining the tone of the game. They're clearly going more serious this time, but hopefully they don't go 100% serious.
I think they will, because Remedy's got that in their locker. Like I don't know if you've played Control or if that's on the pile as well. But there is a
played 5 minutes and then said I'll finish that later and didn't.
there is a moment in Control. I'll refer to it as the corridor sequence, which is like completely mad and like very out of place and very like Remedy. So I just want that to be here. I'm looking for, well, not here because I'm a bit busy, but give me it as soon as I'm done with this bloody.
Even if the TVs again, like showing the fake Twilight Zone show, that'll do me like that. If that's where I get my levity, or just a wee breaks to just watch those, then that'll do.
I bet it'll be Alan on that like late night show that they show over and over again.
Bits,
yeah. Some pricks ran on stage. Now, that is as much identification as they will be getting in this this program. I can't. Well, there's two things. One, I can't believe how easy it was for two of them to get on stage. Second thing, Keeley handled it very well. Like the fact that he didn't crack one of them with that heavy microphone was more patience than I would have shown in a similar situation. But Chris, this is going to end in somebody getting really hurt. What do they do to stop this?
See, I'm not sure they can, because I mean, short of it being like a football game and there being a row of stewards right across the front row of the stage, Andy, well, he said there's an article up on VGC now. Andy interviewed the head of Gamescom, and the full interview is coming up later. On the site where Andy asked him about it, and he basically said, like, we've done everything we could realistically do. Like, we it's not like this was a massive surprise. He basically said that we planned for these things happening, and his argument was like that's why the security appeared pretty quickly when the guy got on stage. It's like, but at the same time, there's only so short of. He says it's like a balancing act where they want to still have interaction between the content and the attendees, so without it turning into, like I say, a football match with a line of police right around the front of the stage. But at the same time, people are taking it to extremes, and like you say, like as soon as it happened, we say to each other, well, it's a good job we didn't have a knife, because like that could have turned very nasty very quickly, and it's like you've got to wonder how they're going to stop these things, because now that it's happened twice, you're going to get arseholes going, oh, I'm going to be next, because everyone wants their fame in some way or another, and they need to be careful.
I don't know if it's a case of like maybe like the stage design seemed quite low, so they seem to just be able to like walk up some stairs and be like on. I don't know if it's a case of maybe raising that and like a gig essentially where you'd have like the barricade, and then kind of like invisible barriers so that you're not on the stage immediately.
Everything should be presented on those big platforms from the gladiators.
Yes, exactly.
The ones where they fight with the big sticks. Instead, they just stand and host the games. I think that's sensible.
Is the referee for Gladiator still kicking a ball?
John Anderson? I think so. I mean, Gladiators is coming back. BBC's doing Gladiators soon, so if they had any...
John Anderson, still alive, seemingly.
Good.
91, come on now.
I was going to say, if this BBC one that's coming back, they should bring him back, but maybe not, eh? That's rolling the dice.
But perhaps not. Blows the whistle once and instantly dies. Aye, it's fair. It says here, occupation, sports coach, partially retired sports coach.
Well, is he still up for it then?
At 91.
Well, he used to be... Did he used to be a teacher or something?
Yeah, he did. John Anderson. Hopefully get him on the podcast next week to talk about Starfield.
Well, apparently he's a massive fan of Dodon Pachi, so...
He's got Dodon Pachi coming out his neck. Next story, Xbox boss would, quote, love to find solutions so games aren't lost when the 360 store closes. That's about as non-committal as he will go. Phil Spencer spoke to Eurogamer regarding the closure of the Xbox 360 store, which is happening on July 29, 2024. I'm sure you'll see 50 articles about it on VGC the week prior to that. According to some VGC analysis, which was conducted by Tom Ivan, around 220 220 games will essentially disappear once this happens. He told Eurogamer that he'd love to find a solution. Quote, there is a list of 220 games that are not back compat, and I have that list and I've got it stapled to my forehead, so there you go.
But he was lying, because I watched that interview and it wasn't on his forehead.
Yeah.
So he's talking shit.
How can we trust anything he says? He'll lie to our face.
Another Phil Spencer deceit.
How many of those are on PC? That's one thing, because it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be able to play it on the existing hardware you bought 15 years ago, but preservation is front and center when all these decisions are made. I will say for us that preservation that's linked to only one piece of hardware is a challenge, because there can be hardware love as well, people who love and want this device to do this forever. But mechanical things will break over time. But that's why we gave people this decision a year to say, hey, if you want to go buy things in the 360 store, we're going to give you a year head start and you can go get these things. Chris, do you think there's... Okay, so I foresee Xbox's showcase next year in like June time. They announced that they've got a portion of those games back compat. Out of the 220, how many do you think they actually get and how many are actually gone?
I'm not as confident. I think he's talking a good game here, but I think they're just going to go sorry and just move on, because the games that are left, by and large, nobody cares that much about them, unfortunately. There's very few bombshells there left, and the ones that are like good games are also available on other platforms, which is something I've been, in case you haven't noticed, I've been doing a lot of arguing on Twitter since this article went up, because a lot of people don't seem to agree with me with the idea that if these 360 games are disappearing, these digital only 360 games are disappearing, it doesn't mean the games are disappearing because they're available on other systems. Whereas I think every version of a game counts as a separate game. So people, it's like if they, not that it's happening, but if the 360 version of Bayonetta disappeared, you can't say, well, at least the PS3 version's there, because they both play very differently, as anyone who's played them both knows. So even if a 360 version and a PS3 version are identical, it's still part of that game's history that it was released on X number of systems, and people in the future who want to research those games or whatever for archival purposes should be able to access all versions of them. And without going into the dodgy buying an N-Gage route, like everyone, there will be ways to play these games in a non-legal sense, but the people want to. Some people want the knowledge that these games are preserved and available in the future, and sadly, it doesn't look like it's going to happen here.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list now. Obviously, a lot of the stuff is random shit that like no one will care when it's gone. But there are a few strange, just for curiosity's sake. Mighty Number 9. I know that's on other platforms and stuff, but that's a weird ass game. There's stuff like. There's obviously stuff that's been superseded by other versions, like there's Res HD here, but there's like Res Infinite, etc., and so on. The Resident Evil games.
There's that kind of Burnout spin-off which is quite interesting. The kind of top-down Burnout game where you just try and make the best crash you can. Kind of quirky stuff like that.
I mean, there's two. A lot of these games could be put down to like licensing issues, like South Park going to be bothered to get Let's Go Tower Defense Play and Tenorman's Revenge off the 360 store. Like, perhaps not.
Especially because I imagine those are different. That's changed hands since then, because I can't remember if that was Activision. Someone different did those South Park games too.
I thought that was original THQ that did those.
Was that THQ? I'm going
perhaps
back,
not.
I'm going. I remember those games. Activision was Acclaim was the first one. Yeah, it's crazy days. But so it's like it's not like I'm not under any kind of false like pretenses that a lot of these games are going to be missed, with the greatest of respect to them. But in the just grand scheme of things, it's just a shame to see more games disappearing. This medium is different from film and books in that we're still in the kind of early days of this medium. We're still roughly 50 years into it, if you don't count the kind of bizarre outliers from like the 50s and 60s, like if you're assuming that it kind of started generally with Pong, even though it didn't, we're still only 50 years into this medium. And when you look back at the start of movies, there are so many films from the first 20-30 years of movies that are gone forever because they weren't properly preserved, and there are already so many mobile games that are gone forever because they weren't properly preserved, and some of them, a lot of games have their online servers turned off, so that even if they were preserved, they can't be played anymore. It's a shame that 50 years from now people won't be able to get a full picture of what this was, basically.
Do you want to hear something strange?
Yes.
Do you know who published both South Park Let's Go Tower Defense Play and South Park Tenorman's Revenge?
On you go.
Microsoft Studios. Which makes this even weirder.
Yeah, that is weird. Well, they must just not have the license anymore then, presumably. Oh, so those wouldn't have been on PS3 then, would they?
No, those were just on Xbox.
God rest them.
God rest them. Perhaps not the greatest loss, but I mean, if something as big as like a licensed South Park game published by Microsoft can get binned off, then what?
Well, it's just stuff like, I mean, it's just stuff that, again, it's not in the grand scheme of things, not a massive loss, but in the future, if someone wants to do the history of South Park games, then they're gubbed when they get to those two, or they're going to have to go down like dodgy routes to get them. It just makes going back through the history of games that little bit harder, basically.
I mean, I had a PS3 sitting under my desk for ages that just had Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and DJ Hero on it, and now DJ Hero's the only one left. I've
still got my 360 with the best of the my retail 360 from back in the day with the best of the games that are no longer available. So it's got the Outrun Xbox Live Arcade version of Outrun, Rock Band Blitz, which to this day I believe is the best rhythm action game. Scott Pilgrim, like you say. So yeah, it's I think there's going to be a few more games getting added to that before this closes.
Yeah, unfortunately. We will be back after this. And we're back. Small moment to say, Terry Funk, God rest him.
God rest him.
We couldn't have a podcast without talking about the Funker. My favourite Terry Funk moment, and it won't be one that it's not a rare moment. It's not a match from Japan from 1973. It's when he got kicked by a horse in WCW and responded by saying, "Fucking horse." That's peak wrestling for me.
My favourite, and it's weird, my favourite Terry Funk moment is I don't think he actually knows much about it. And it's extremely niche, but like for a period my brother was in the Insane Clown Posse for
nice. He's a juggalo.
Yeah, it was not so much anymore, thankfully, but back in this is like late 90s, early 2000s, when it was cool to be a juggalo. He was a juggalo.
Mm-hmm.
And they released a bunch of wrestling DVDs called Stranglemania, where, because they loved the wrestling, obviously, the ICP. Yeah. And what they'd done for this Stranglemania was they basically took that Japanese deathmatch tournament that with the famous Cactus Jack and Terry Funk exploding barbed wire deathmatch. They took that, they got that entire pay-per-view and did fake commentary over it, like nice. as to like kind of legendary commentators, and it's hilarious. I don't care for their music a bit, but their wrestling commentary is hilarious. And they changed the name, so instead of Terry Funk and Cactus Jack, it was Cactus Sack. And Drunk Terry Flunk. And Terry Funk was wearing his Funk U t-shirt, or the Funk University, the Funk U.
Yeah.
And the t-shirt appeared for the first time on screen, and one of the ICP just went, "Funk you, motherfucker." And ever since then, I always say that to my brother all the time. So like, I know it's such a niche thing that's not massively funny to anyone who wasn't there, but that's what I'll always remember about Terry Funk is Funk you. God rest him.
A recent Terry Funk adjacent moment that I really liked was it was after some AEW pay-per-view. CM Punk was doing a press conference and he was on one as usual. I think it was actually the one where he went absolutely mental and just started calling like Hangman Page and the Young Bucks like dickheads and shit like that. But it was like, if you had Terry Funk back, and then he points to the journalist and he's like, "Have any of you seen Terry Funk?" And a few of them put their hand up, and then he goes, "Have any of you really seen Terry Funk?" And Dave Meltzer's there like, "Who are you talking to?" Like, I was there, mate. I was seeing Terry Funk before you were born. And he was like, "Okay, Dave, you don't really count." But anyone who wants a real proper obituary of Terry Funk, Meltzer's probably going to put out about 12,000 words today. His obituaries are always, whatever you think about him, his obituaries are fantastic. Yeah. There's not a man on earth that probably knows more about that era of professional wrestling.
For anyone not familiar too much with Terry Funk or old school wrestling, I'd go and check out the old documentary Beyond the Mat, because Terry Funk features quite prominently in that. I just think to yourself, look how fucked he looked then. And then consider that documentary was like 25 years ago. It's like the guy fought so many times after that. And yeah, so in a sense, it's amazing that he reached 79, considering some of the stuff he went through. But yeah, fair play to him.
God rest him. Good old run, Terry Funk. Chainsaw Charlie. Also known as the Black Baron, Dr. Knows It All, and the Texan.
Dr. Knows It All.
We are not likely
to
see his like again. Next story, BioWare is laying off 50 employees. In a blog post that BioWare General Manager Gary McKay said reorganizing its team was necessary as the Electronic Arts Studios rethinks its approach to development. Quote, "In order to meet the needs of our upcoming projects, continue to hold ourselves to the highest standard of quality, and ensure BioWare can continue to thrive in an industry that's rapidly evolving, we must shift towards a more agile and more focused studio. It will allow developers to iterate quickly, unlock more creativity," which editors know that's a fucking horrible phrase while you're sacking people, "and form a clear vision of what we're building before development ramps up. This vision balances the current needs of the studio, namely ensuring Dragon Age Dreadwolf is an outstanding game, and with the future, including the success of the next Mass Effect." This seems like a weird move for a team that are making two absolutely enormous games, like not only finishing off a Dragon Age for what, a 2025 release maybe, then a Mass Effect for like a 2027.
Yeah.
And some of the people that were getting let go were like seniors and stuff like that. So how did this hit you?
I mean, reading between the lines, and that's all you can do here is attempt to read between the lines. And again, this is purely guesswork. But from what Gary, I can never tell if it's McKay or Mackay, is saying, the impression, again, like you say, it's really shit language to be using when you're letting people go, like saying that, oh, but this will let us unlock more creativity by making people redundant. It gives the impression that there's lots of fighting an argument about what the game's supposed to be. And if some senior people are being let go, then it sounds like there may have been a clash at a senior level as to the game should be this, no, the game should be that, no, it should be this, it should be that. So if he's saying that by getting rid of some of these people, it will let them unlock more creativity and form a clear vision of what we're building, it sounds like they're trying to remove one side of the argument to so that everyone's on the right track and everyone knows exactly what the vision is. Again, that's pure guesswork. I don't know anything about what's going on behind the scenes, but the way that's worded suggests to me that this has been done to get everyone on the same kind of path and avoid any more arguments about what should be going forwards.
Yeah, it's always sad when people get laid off, but also the market for the games market is very, very hot right now, so these people will likely land on their feet, especially if they're coming from somewhere like BioWare. Like that's a big cheese, especially with the type of games that every studio is making right now. Like every studio is making a massive RPG, a massive open world game, a massive whatever. Like, so
and it's a crazy one, and you've got to think you've got to think it's not a money saving thing, because it's not like EA don't have 2 pennies to rub together. Like they're like FIFA or EA FC Ultimate Team alone is paying for like the entire every game BioWare makes for the next decade. So it doesn't appear to be a money saving thing. There must be another. I would assume, again, I'm jumping to conclusions here, but it feels like there's another reason for this, and it's been done to create more harmony in the team for whatever reason. Maybe it's just a too many cooks situation, where they've overemployed for these games, and there's just a mashup of too many ideas all coming together. Maybe it's that, but either way, it's not ideal.
And there's also perhaps an argument that maybe Mass Effect is further away than we think, and the bean counters are like, it doesn't matter how much money the other elements of EA are making, we need to look like we are a money making operation here. So true. If we can trim like 50 salaries, that's like several $millions that we can just like put back in. So yeah, it's a sad situation. Speaking of a sad situation, Sony's remote play handheld Project Q is now called PlayStation Portal. The PSP is back, baby. Are you ready? It will cost $200 to play remote play at 1080p with a resolution 1080p resolution at 60 frames per second. Chris, how many of these will you be buying day one?
I'll be buying roughly zero.
Roughly zero, so that could be one.
With a correction rate of 0.
Oh.
It'll be. I didn't get this when they announced it, and I was thinking. I think I've said on previous podcasts, let's wait and see if there's more information to come that will make it clearer as to what the point of this is. And more information has now come, and no point.
I've got that information for you right here, Chris. As the number one Sony fan, as the number one ladies detective agency on this podcast, I will read this quote from the PlayStation blog. PlayStation Portal is the perfect device for gamers and households where they might need to share the living room TV or simply want to play PS5 games in another room of the house. PlayStation Portal will connect remotely to your PS5 over Wi-Fi, so you'll be able to swiftly jump from playing on your PS5 to your PlayStation Portal. PlayStation Portal can play supported games that are installed on your PlayStation 5 console and use the DualSense controller. Furthermore, PlayStation VR 2 games, which require the headset, and games that are streamed through PlayStation Plus's premium cloud streaming are not supported. Chris, how many will you be buying?
With this new information, I've revised my number to 0. It's a Wii U gamepad with half the functionality.
Yeah,
it's
the doesn't even have Nintendo.
It's the TV bit of the Wii U where if someone wants to use the telly, you go, oh, it's okay, I'll just switch to my Wii U, but it doesn't have the asynchronous, asymmetrical multiplayer aspect of it. It's just it's a £200 thing that does what your phone does and what your PC does, and if the only thing that I think would have made it interesting, would have even maybe caught my eye, is if they'd allowed you, if you were a PlayStation Plus premium subscriber, to stream games on it. And they obviously were never going to allow that because then people would say, well, I'll just get a subscription and buy this and not need a PS5. And they obviously want people to buy PS5s first and foremost. And if they allowed PlayStation Plus premium streaming on the PlayStation Portal, a lot of people would have just bought a PlayStation Portal and a subscription, and that would have been it. But at the same time, let me, as a PlayStation Plus premium subscriber, let me use my PlayStation Portal to stream PlayStation Plus premium games via my PS5, and if there's latency, then fine, I'll deal with it, but I'm sure there'll be some RPGs that'll allow for it. It's crazy that the only thing you can do with this £200 slab is play from your own PlayStation 5 as long as it's turned on. I don't get it. Like, your phone does that. And the fact is, like, most phones, most modern phones, and PCs and stuff support the DualSense controller. So it's not even like the remote play is massively hampered on other devices, because many of them support the DualSense as well. So I don't get it. I'm always first to buy new hardware. I bought a PlayStation TV like back in the day to play Vita and PSP games on the telly. I bought the iToy. I bought Buzz. I bought all the gimmicks. I'm not going anywhere near this. I can't.
Yes, even I am not going to get one of these. I was sitting talking to my partner last night, and we were talking about going on holiday and stuff like that, and talking about what do you do when you're sitting by the pool on holiday. And I was like, the last beachy holiday I went on, I was playing Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker on the PSP Go. Remember the wee slide up one? That was an excellent bit of hardware. That was cool. I was like, that's what I do. And she was like, would you take the Switch? And I was like, and I almost said, I was like, no, I'll just take that new PlayStation thing, completely forgetting that it's basically it's worthless when you're outside your house. Like, it's such a strange decision. Off the back of PSVR 2, doing this, you've got to imagine Jim Ryan's going to kick the hinges off the doors at like Sony Hardware and be like, lads, see that fancy controller you did? Good, that's selling well. People seem to be like, people aren't like flying to get them, but the hardcores are getting those. They seem quite happy with it. See, that's fucking headset and this bloody tablet. Can you just stop?
Do you know, I'm worried that the PlayStation Portal actually does less than people think it does, because they're being very careful to suggest that it can only be used in your house. They're not saying, because even on your phone, if you do remote play in your home, as long as somebody's at home to turn your PlayStation 5 on for you, you can play like in a hotel room on your phone. You can do remote play. They're not saying this because it's Wi-Fi only. Even in a hotel room with Wi-Fi, I get the impression that it's going to be the sort of Wi-Fi connection where two devices connect to the same Wi-Fi in your house. I think it's going to be that sort of thing, where Sony wants no middleman, like, kind of duties whatsoever. Like, when you're remote playing from a different location, you connect to a thing and your PS5 connects to a thing and you both stream together. Whereas I get the impression the Wi-Fi in this, and that's why there's no other connections and it's Wi-Fi only, is that you connect both to your router, basically, and that's how it works. Because they're specifically saying this is a perfect device for gamers in households where they might need to share their living room TV or play PS5 games in another room in the house. It doesn't say, while you're on holiday, you can play your PS5. It doesn't say that. I think this is even more limited than some people believe, I think.
I'm dying to get one and fanny about with it. Like, I just want to get it, put it through its paces, see what the limitations are, and then I want to see how people engage it. Like, what is in that thing and what could it turn into? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, is it strong enough to run games?
Well, there was that breakdown that implied it was a proper like Android tablet or something, wasn't it? Like underneath. So like there's it does stuff. it's not
stuff Sony wants you to be doing.
So yeah, it'll be interesting a few months down the line to see what it can do, what people make it do beyond
when you've injected it with a lethal dose of poison.
When you apply the N-Gauge patch.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
A little bit of the old N-Gauge patch. This week I've been playing, well, last week at this point, this week I've been playing this stupid Star game, but the previous week I was playing Immortals of Avium, a game you may have heard of on the show because I've played it a few times now. Reviews on the site, it's really solid. It's like a really great start for a new IP. So funnily enough, it's an EA thing, and it reminds me of, remember in 2007 when they were like, we're going to do this this initiative EA where we're going to put out Dead Space, we're going to put out Mirror's Edge, we're going to put out Skate, we're going to put out these games that are not franchises, not your Battlefields, not your sports games. It has that vibe about it, to the point where, firstly, I really hope it gets a sequel. I'm worried considering where they've put it out. Like, the chatter around this game before it was even reviewed was, why are they putting it out like a week before Starfield? It was originally meant to come out in July when nothing was out, which would have been a nice spot. But between all the Baldur's Gate patter, which is still going, but it's like slightly waning, and you can feel people, well, especially as like leaks of Starfield are happening, you can feel that ramping up. We're getting into that era. Then as soon as Starfield's out, then it's going to be the September rush, and all that stuff's going to happen. So I hope it makes it to a second one. It's a first person magic shooter. Your kind of gimmick is that you've got red, blue, and green magic, and each of those represents like a style of gun almost. The guy that directed it, Brett Robbins, who we have an interview with at the end of the show, used to work on Call of Duty campaigns, and you can really feel that while you're playing it. But yeah, it's an interesting, it's a meaty kind of single player experience, which I feel like at some point, Chris, and maybe the last or previous generation, we just got to a point where we accepted that single player campaigns of this ilk were like 6 or 7 hours, but this is much more like, I think I was like 15 or something like that. So yeah, it's one I would say to maybe wait for EA Play. Is that what they call their subscription thing? Because it screams EA Play.
I was thinking exactly that. I was thinking, this sounds really good, but I've got so much on just now. As soon as it hits EA Play, I'm on it. And that might actually not be a terrible thing for it, because it might take a hit financially for the first release. Like you say, they've released it at a terrible time. But when it comes to EA Play, if they give it enough of a push and enough, there's enough buzz around it when it comes to EA Play from a lot of people saying, by the way, a lot of people passed on this before, but you really should give it your attention. Then if a sequel does come around, then maybe there'll be a larger number of people who played the first one, and the sequel might do better.
Yeah, it's a strange one, but I enjoyed it. Like from when I played it in San Francisco before I got apocalyptically unwell, I really enjoyed it, and I was like, I hope this like sticks the landing, and it does. It also looks really nice. It's like a locked 60 on consoles. I would maybe say it's perhaps a PC one, because it's quite precise with the shooting sometimes. But yeah, it's one to look out for, because I do fear that it's destined to be like ridiculously cheap or EA played before time. It's not like something like Jedi Survivor, where they're going to keep that off their subscription services as long as possible, so they can just keep like ticking away at it. But yeah, it's an interesting little game. We will have a conversation with some of the team from Mortals of Avium following the conclusion of this show. You've been playing anything this week, Chris?
I have. Let me just check and see if I'm allowed to actually say.
Can you legally talk
I'm
about
not sure.
it? In the meantime, let me get on my high horse. Last night, it was about 10 o'clock at night. Me and my partner sitting watching YouTube, as we do. We watch someone who will remain nameless, because I don't want to promote them, but they open Pokemon cards, and they were opening the new McDonald's Pokemon cards, which have returned to McDonald's stores nationwide, apparently. So I think, you know what, let's get in the car, go to the McDonald's at Linwood, and ask to buy these Pokemon cards. We get there, no Pokemon cards, an absolute disaster. We end up just getting a McFlurry and a sugary iron brew, and that causes hallucinations during the night. It was an absolute nightmare. Chris, can you talk about this?
Okay,
game?
so no. Is the short answer. So yeah, that'll be one for next week. Like in the 3 seconds in between Starfield chat, I'll be able to slip this one in. But anyone who listened to last week's podcast might be able to glean what I'm playing now, because I went on a nice wee positive rant about it like last week, and I now have it. So like it'll be that basically. But
Chris's review of Tekken 8 coming up.
Confirmed. Yeah, so we'll talk about it next week. But whatever it is, I'm enjoying it. I've also done
no deliveries during the podcast.
No deliveries. I was expecting. I was promised and if he'll be listening now, but I was promised by my publisher John that the first copy of the Dreamcast Encyclopedia, my brand new tome, will be at my door before 11:30, and it's now 11:20 and nothing. I was hoping for a comical set piece during the podcast, but we have had...
You're absolutely destroying kayfabe here.
We've had hee-haw Barney McGraw, and so it's a sad day. It's a sad day for the literary world, but we'll get over it.
It's like when they burned the Library of Alexandria. Where can we get this book?
Well, once I get it, I'll tell you. You can get it from all good bookshops and some of the bad ones. Amazon are obviously doing it. Pen and Sword are the publishers, so you can go straight to there if you want. Other than that, Amazon, any W.H. Smith in America, chapters in Indigo in Canada, and Barnes and Noble, they're all doing it. So if you just search Chris Scullion or search Dreamcast Encyclopedia, you'll find it there. Thank you very much, Jordan, for asking me how I can plug my book.
You're welcome. This is my show. I'll do what I want. What was the name of your publisher, John?
John Wright.
John Wright? You're taking the piss.
Why?
John Wright?
Yeah, I'm going to check to see if there's any.
John Wright books? Okay. John, I would write a book about Pokemon. You know where to find me. Next week, we will be talking about Starfield. We will have so much Starfield coverage, it will be coming out of your neck. Before we go, we'd like to thank the great Grant Kirkhope for the use of the VGC Podcast theme. You can send any questions, comments, and concerns to podcast@videogameschronicle.com. Say goodbye, Chris.
Goodbye, Chris.